The night was cold and quiet in the Montana mountains. Jake Miller walked through the forest with his flashlight, checking the trails like he did every evening. He was a wildlife ranger, and he lived alone in a small cabin far from the nearest town. The stars above were bright and clear, and the only sounds were his boots on the frozen ground and the wind in the pine trees. Jake was 32 years old. He had been a medic in the army for 8 years before he came to live in these mountains. He liked the silence here. He liked being alone. After everything he had seen in the war, the peace of the wilderness felt like medicine for his tired soul. He was about to turn back toward his cabin when something caught his eye. A light appeared in the sky, brighter than any star. It moved fast, leaving a trail of fire behind it. Jake stopped and watched. At first, he thought it was a shooting star, but it was too big, too bright, and it was getting closer. The fireball screamed across the sky and crashed into the mountain ridge about 2 miles away. The ground shook under Jake's feet. A boom echoed through the valley like thunder. Birds flew from the trees in panic. Jake stood still for a moment, his heart beating fast. A meteor, he thought. Or maybe a plane had gone down. Either way, someone might need help. He ran back to his cabin and grabbed his emergency medical bag. He loaded it onto his ATV and started the engine. The cold wind cut his face as he drove through the dark forest toward the crash site. The trees around him were black shadows against the starry sky. It took him 20 minutes to reach the ridge. He could see smoke rising against the stars. A strange smell filled the air, like burning metal mixed with something sweet he could not name. Jake slowed down and moved carefully toward the source of the smoke. What he found made him stop breathing. It was not a meteor. It was not a plane. It was something else entirely. A craft of some kind sat half buried in the earth, still glowing with heat. The shape was like nothing Jake had ever seen. Smooth curves mixed with sharp angles. The surface looked like metal, but also like glass, and it seemed to shimmer with colors that shifted when he moved his flashlight. Jake had seen many things in his life. He had been to war. He had watched men die. He had faced fear many times. But standing before this strange craft, he felt a new kind of fear. A fear mixed with wonder. He moved closer. The craft was broken open on one side, and smoke poured from the crack. Jake could see lights flickering inside. He knew he should leave. He knew he should call someone. But something pulled him forward. A feeling deep in his chest told him that someone inside needed help. He climbed through the broken opening, coughing from the smoke. Inside, the craft was filled with strange machines and screamed symbols he did not understand. The air was hot and hard to breathe. His flashlight cut through the darkness. Then he saw them. 2 bodies lay on the floor of the craft. One was a tall male figure in dark armor. Jake could see immediately that this one was dead. The wounds were too severe. But the other figure was different. It was smaller, more delicate. And it was moving. Jake dropped to his knees beside the second figure. It was a female. Her skin was pale silver, like moonlight made solid. Her hair was white as snow and fell around her face in tangles. She wore torn clothes that might have been elegant once. And there was blood. Strange blue-colored blood, coming from a wound in her side. Her eyes opened suddenly. They were violet, bright like amethyst gems, and they were filled with pure terror. She tried to scream. She tried to crawl away from him. Her hands pushed against the floor as she dragged herself backward, crying out in a language Jake could not understand. Every movement made her wound bleed more. Every breath was a gasp of pain and fear. Jake raised his hand slowly. He kept his voice soft and low. "Easy," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help." She did not understand his words, but she watched his face. She watched his hands. Jake stayed very still, making no sudden movements. He pointed to his medical bag, then pointed to her wound. He mimed the action of bandaging, of healing. The female alien watched him with those frightened violet eyes. Her breathing was fast and shallow. Jake could see that she was deciding something. Trust or flee. Live or die. Slowly, very slowly, she stopped trying to crawl away. Her body relaxed, just a little. She was too weak to fight, too injured to run. She had no choice but to let this strange creature help her. Jake moved carefully to her side. He opened his bag and pulled out bandages, antiseptic, and his field surgery kit. He examined her wound. It was bad. Some kind of burn combined with deep cuts from metal fragments. He had seen similar wounds in combat, but this was different. The tissue underneath looked wrong. Not human. He worked quickly but gently. The female alien watched everything he did. When he touched her skin, she flinched. But she did not pull away. When he cleaned the wound, she made a sound of pain, but she held still. When he wrapped the bandage around her body, she looked in his face with something new in her eyes. Not just fear, confusion, maybe even a small beginning of trust. The dead male alien had been her protector. Jake could see that from the armor, from the way the body was positioned between her and the door. Someone had died trying to keep her safe. Jake looked at the female. She was shivering now from cold or shock or both. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She stared at him like he had given her something precious. Outside, the night was dark and cold. Jake knew that whatever had attacked this craft might come looking. He could not explain how he knew this, but he felt it. Danger was coming. He could call the authorities. He could report what he had found. But looking at the terrified creature before him, he made a different choice. "Can you walk?" he asked, knowing she would not understand. He mimed standing up. He pointed toward the broken opening of the craft. Then he pointed into the distance, toward safety, toward his cabin. The female alien looked at him for a long moment. Then, with great effort and much pain, she nodded. She understood. She was choosing to trust him. Jake helped her to her feet. She leaned against him, her silver skin cold against his arm. Together, slowly they made their way out of the ruined craft and into the night. As they walked through the dark forest toward his cabin, Jake looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, among those distant lights, was her home. And somewhere out there were the enemies who had tried to kill her. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let her die. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, she was now under his protection. The cabin appeared through the trees, a small square of warmth in the cold wilderness. Jake helped the alien princess through the door and laid her gently on his bed. Her violet eyes closed. Her breathing became slower. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. The stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in the darkness, something was already searching. But for now, in this small cabin in the mountains, a human man watched over a dying alien princess. And without knowing it, both of their lives had changed forever. The first 3 days were the hardest. Jake barely slept. He sat beside the bed, watching the alien female breathe, checking her wound, and trying to keep her alive. Her body worked differently than a human body. His medicines helped, but not in the ways he expected. Some made her better. Some made her worse. He had to learn by watching, by guessing, by trying again and again. She had a fever that came and went like waves. Her silver skin would turn gray when she was weak, then glow faintly when she was stronger. Sometimes she spoke in her sleep, calling out in that strange language. Her voice was beautiful, like music, but the sounds were full of pain and fear. Jake gave her water. He made soup and fed it to her in small spoonfuls. He kept the cabin warm with the fire. And slowly, day by day, she began to heal. On the fourth day, she woke up fully for the first time. Her violet eyes opened and looked around the cabin. She saw the wooden walls, the simple furniture, the fire burning in the stone fireplace. She saw Jake sitting in a chair beside her, his eyes tired and kind. She spoke. The words were strange, full of sounds Jake had never heard before. He shook his head to show he did not understand. She tried again, speaking slower. But it was no use. Their languages were too different. Jake pointed to himself. Jake, he said. My name is Jake. She watched his mouth form the word. Then, slowly, she pointed to herself. Lyra, she said. Her voice was soft and uncertain. Jake smiled. Lyra, that's a nice name. She did not understand his words, but she seemed to understand his smile. Her expression relaxed, just a little. Over the next week, they learned to communicate without words. Jake used his hands to point, to mime, to draw pictures. Lyra watched everything with sharp, intelligent eyes. She learned quickly. Jake showed her the cabin. He showed her the kitchen, the bathroom, the window that looked out at the mountains. He showed her the photographs on his wall, his family, his army friends, his life before the wilderness. Lyra studied the photographs with great interest. She pointed to one picture of Jake in his military uniform, standing with other soldiers. She looked at him with a question in her eyes. Jake touched the photograph and then touched a scar on his arm. He mimed fighting, then healing. He pointed to himself and mimed helping injured people. Lyra nodded slowly. She understood. He'd been a warrior and a healer. On the 8th day, Lyra was strong enough to stand and walk a little. She moved to a bag she had brought from the crash. Jake had collected it along with a few other items from her broken craft. She opened the bag and pulled out a small device. She opened the base, like a metal disc with glowing symbols. She worked on the device for hours, her fingers moving quickly despite her weakness. Jake brought her food and water and let her work. By evening, she placed the device against her throat and pressed a button. Can you understand me? She said. The voice was strange, mechanical and flat, but the words were English. Jake's eyes went wide. Yes, I can understand you. Lyra closed her eyes in relief. The device was a translator. It was damaged and imperfect, but it worked well enough. That night, sitting by the fire, Lyra told Jake her story. She was a princess. The crown princess of the Aetheri Empire, one of the oldest and largest civilizations in the galaxy. Her people had traveled among the stars for thousands of years. They ruled over hundreds of worlds, but power creates enemies. A military commander named Drath had grown tired of the royal family. He believed the Aetheri had become weak and soft. He wanted war and conquest. The Emperor, Lyra's father, wanted peace. 3 weeks ago, Drath had attacked the royal palace with his loyal soldiers. The Emperor and Empress were killed. Lyra's younger brother was captured or killed. She did not know which. Only Lyra escaped, thanks to Captain Vorn, the dead male in the crash. He had given his life to put her on an escape ship and send her through an emergency wormhole. The wormhole was unstable. It brought her here, to this small blue planet that her people called a primitive world. A planet they had been watching for centuries, but never contacted. A planet whose inhabitants were considered too violent, too dangerous, too young to join the galactic community. Earth. This was Earth, and she had crashed here to die. But you did not die, Jake said quietly. Lyra looked at him. Her violet eyes held something complicated. Surprise, perhaps, gratitude, and confusion. No, she said. Because of you. I do not understand why you helped me. My people would not have helped you. We have rules. We do not interfere with developing species. We would have let you die." Jake was quiet for a moment. He thought about her words. Then he shook his head. "Maybe that's true," he said. "But I couldn't just leave you there. You were hurt. You were scared. That's all I needed to know." Lyra stared at him. In her world, everything had a reason. Politics, strategy, advantage. No one did anything without expecting something in return. But this human, this Jake, had saved her life and asked for nothing. "You are strange," she said finally. "Your whole species is considered primitive, violent, dangerous, but you have shown me more kindness than anyone in the royal court ever did." Jake smiled a little. "We're not all good. Humans can be terrible to each other. We've done awful things throughout our history, but we can also be kind. We can choose to help even when it's hard." Lyra was quiet, thinking about his words. Days passed. Lyra grew stronger. Her wound healed faster now, her alien body finally recovering. She spent hours talking with Jake, learning about Earth and humans. She was fascinated by everything. Their history, their art, their music, their wars, and their peace. Jake showed her his books. He played music for her on an old radio. He taught her to cook simple human food. She was amazed by how much variety existed on one small planet. One night, Jake found Lyra crying. She sat by the window, looking at the stars, tears streaming down her silver face. He sat beside her without speaking. "I killed them," she whispered. "Vorn died for me. My parents died because I escaped. If I had stayed, maybe Drath would have stopped. Maybe he would have been satisfied." Jake shook his head. "That's not how men like Drath work. He would have killed you too. Vorn knew that. Your parents knew that. They wanted you to live. How do you know?" Lyra asked, her voice breaking. Jake was silent for a moment. Then he spoke slowly. "When I was in the war, my squad was ambushed. 7 of us went in. Only I came out. My best friend Tommy, he pushed me behind cover right before he was shot. He saved my life." Jake's voice was rough with old pain. "For years, I felt guilty. I thought I should have died instead. I thought it was my fault. But I learned something. The people who sacrifice for us, they don't want us to suffer. They want us to live. Really live. Honor them by surviving, by doing good, by being worthy of the gift they gave." Lyra looked at him with new understanding. This human, this primitive creature, understood pain. He understood loss. He understood the terrible weight of survival. "You are not primitive," Lyra said softly. "I was wrong. My people were wrong. You feel everything as deeply as we do. Maybe more." Jake reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since treating her wounds. Her skin was cool and smooth, like polished stone. She did not pull away. "You're going to be okay," Jake said. "I don't know what comes next. I don't know if your enemies will find you or if you'll find a way home. But I know you're strong. Stronger than you think." Lyra squeezed his hand gently. Outside, the stars burned in the dark sky. Somewhere out there was her empire, her throne, her enemies. But here, in this small cabin with this kind human, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt safe. She felt understood. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she could face whatever came next. Neither of them knew that the next test was already coming. That even now, ships were crossing the dark spaces between stars, carrying hunters who would not stop until the princess was dead. But for this moment, there was only the fire, the warmth, and 2 people from different worlds who had found understanding in each other. And that understanding would change everything. Lyra woke suddenly in the middle of the night. Her eyes snapped open, and she sat up in bed, her heart racing. Something was wrong. She could feel it, like a cold wind blowing through her mind. She moved quickly to her bag and pulled out a small scanning device. Her fingers trembled as she activated it. The screen glowed with symbols and numbers, and what she saw made her blood turn cold. "Jake," she called out. "Jake, wake up." Jake was sleeping in a chair by the fire. He jumped awake at her voice, instantly alert. Years of military training had taught him to wake quickly. "What is it?" he asked, moving to her side. Lyra showed him the device. He could not read the alien symbols, but he could see the fear in her eyes. "A ship," she said. "An ethery ship. It entered this planet's atmosphere 3 hours ago. They are here. They are hunting me." Jake felt his chest tighten. "How many?" "The ship is small. A hunter craft. Probably 4 or 5 soldiers. Trained killers." Lyra's voice was flat, but her hands were shaking. "You have to leave, Jake. You have to run. Hide somewhere far from here. If they find you with me, they will kill you without hesitation." Jake shook his head slowly. "I'm not leaving you. You don't understand." Lyra grabbed his arm. "These are not ordinary soldiers. They are shadows. Elite hunters. They have technology your people cannot imagine. Weapons that can kill from miles away. Cloaking devices that make them invisible. You cannot fight them. No human can." Jake looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to a closet in the corner of the cabin and opened it. Inside were weapons. A hunting rifle. A shotgun. A pistol. Knives. A bow and arrows. And something more. Military gear he had kept from his service. Night vision goggles. Body armor. A tactical vest. "I spent 8 years fighting enemies who had better weapons than me," Jake said quietly, loading his rifle. "I survived because I knew the ground. I knew how to move, how to hide, how to wait. These hunters don't know these mountains. They don't know this forest. They don't know me." He turned to face Lyra. His eyes were calm but hard. The eyes of a soldier. "I didn't save you just to let you die now. We fight together, or we die together. Your choice." Lyra stared at him. She had seen warriors in her life. She had seen generals and soldiers and guards. But she had never seen anything like the determination in this human's face. This was not bravery for glory or honor. This was something simpler. Something more powerful. This was a man who had decided to protect her, and nothing in the galaxy would change his mind. "Together," she whispered, "they move fast." Jake knew they could not stay in the cabin. It was too easy to find, too easy to surround. He led Lyra into the forest, moving through paths he had walked 1,000 times. The night was dark, but he knew every tree, every rock, every stream. He found a cave he had discovered years ago. It was hidden behind a waterfall, impossible to see unless you knew exactly where to look. They set up a base there, gathering supplies and weapons. Then Jake did something the hunters would never expect. He went on the offensive. The ethery shadows landed their craft 5 miles from Jake's cabin. There were 4 of them, all wearing dark armor that seemed to swallow light. They moved through the forest like ghosts, their scanning equipment searching for the princess's life signs. They found the cabin empty. This annoyed them. The primitive native had taken the princess somewhere. But it did not worry them. The human could not hide forever. Their technology would find them eventually. The first shadow died without making a sound. Jake had set a trap. A simple thing. A wire stretched across a path, connected to a bent tree. When the shadow walked into the wire, the tree swung down with tremendous force, driving a sharpened stake through a gap in his armor. The shadow fell. His companions rushed to his position, their weapons ready. But Jake was already gone, moving through the darkness like a ghost himself. The second shadow died an hour later. Jake had climbed a tree and waited with his bow. The arrow flew silent and true, striking the shadow in the throat where the armor was weakest. Another hunter fell. Now the remaining two shadows were scared. They had expected an easy hunt. A primitive planet. A wounded princess and maybe one ignorant native. Instead, they were being hunted by something that moved through the dark like a predator. They called for support. But their ship was far away, and they had been trained to work alone. They pressed on, anger replacing fear. They would find this human and make him suffer. Lyra was not idle during this time. She had recovered enough of her strength to fight. She still had one weapon from the crash. A small energy pistol that Vorn had given her for emergencies. She waited in the cave, watching the entrance, ready to protect herself if the hunters found her. But as the night went on and Jake did not return, she could not stay still any longer. She took the pistol and went out into the forest to find him. She found him just as the remaining two shadows found him first. Jake was injured. One of the shadows had shot him with an energy weapon. His left arm hung useless at his side, burned and bleeding. He was hiding behind a boulder, his rifle in his good hand, breathing hard. The two shadows approached slowly, their weapons raised. They could see he was wounded. They thought the fight was over. "Human," one of them said through a translator. "You have killed two of my brothers. For that, I will make your death slow." "Very slow," Jake laughed. It was a strange sound, rough and tired. "You talk too much." He stood up suddenly and fired his rifle. The shot hit one shadow in the knee, shattering the joint. The shadow screamed and fell. Before the other could react, Jake threw his rifle at him and charged. It was a stupid thing to do. The shadow was taller, stronger, trained in combat for centuries. But Jake was not trying to win a fair fight. He had a knife hidden in his boot. As they crashed together, he pulled it free and drove it upward into the shadow's armpit, another weak point in the armor. The shadow roared in pain and threw Jake away. He crashed against a tree and fell to the ground. The shadow pulled the knife from his body and advanced, blood pouring from his wound. His eyes burned with rage. "I will tear you apart with my hands," the shadow growled. A beam of blue light hit him in the back. The shadow froze, his eyes wide, then fell forward dead. Lyra stood behind him, the energy pistol smoking in her hand. She ran to Jake and dropped to her knees beside him. He was alive, but barely. His wounds were severe. His breathing was shallow. "You fool," she whispered, tears falling from her eyes. "You brave, stupid fool." She looked around. The last shadow, the one Jake had shot in the knee, was crawling toward his weapon. Lyra raised her pistol and fired again. He stopped moving. The forest was quiet. The hunt was over. Lyra used every bit of medical knowledge she had. She used technology from the dead shadows. She used supplies from Jake's own medical kit. She worked through the rest of the night, fighting to save the man who had fought to save her. As the sun rose over the mountains, Jake opened his eyes. He was weak. He was in terrible pain. But he was alive. Lyra was sitting beside him, holding his hand. Her face was exhausted but relieved. "We won," she said softly. "They're all dead." "You killed them." "You killed 4 elite ethery hunters." Jake managed a weak smile. "I had help." Lyra shook her head in amazement. "My people have watched your species for centuries. We called you primitive. We thought you were animals barely awake to intelligence. But you—" She paused, struggling for words. "You are something we never expected. Something we never understood." She leaned forward and kissed his forehead gently. "You are not primitive, Jake Miller. You are extraordinary. And I will never let my people forget what humanity is capable of." Outside, the sun rose golden over the mountains. The bodies of the hunters lay cold in the forest. And in a small cave behind a waterfall, a wounded human and an alien princess rested together, survivors of a night that had changed everything. The hunt was over, but their story was just beginning. A month had passed since the crash. Jake's wounds healed slowly, but they healed. Lyra stayed by his side through the long days of recovery, just as he had stayed by hers. They had saved each other now. The debt between them was balanced. The autumn was fading into winter. Snow began to fall on the mountains, covering the forest in white silence. The bodies of the hunters had been buried deep in the wilderness where no one would ever find them. The crashed alien craft was hidden beneath fallen trees and rocks. From the outside, everything looked normal, but nothing was normal anymore. Jake had seen too much. He had fought creatures from another world. He had learned that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that the universe did not think much of humanity. Lyra spent her days teaching Jake about the galaxy. She used her damaged devices to show him maps of star systems, images of alien worlds, and histories of civilizations that had risen and fallen over millions of years. The Aethery Empire was vast. It included over 200 worlds and dozens of different species. The Aethery themselves were ancient, one of the oldest species still alive in the galaxy. They saw themselves as guardians of order, protectors of peace. But they were also proud. Very proud. They believed their way was the only right way. "Your people have been watching us for centuries?" Jake asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Lyra nodded. "We discovered Earth about 300 years ago. Your people were just learning to sail across your oceans. We placed satellites in orbit to observe you. We studied your languages, your cultures, your wars. And you decided we were too primitive to contact." Lyra hesitated. "It was not just that you were primitive. Many species are primitive when first discovered. We helped them develop. We guide them. But humans—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Humans scared us." Jake raised his eyebrows. "We scared you? Your people have ships that fly between stars. Weapons that can destroy cities. How could we scare you?" Lyra looked at him with serious eyes. "Because you are violent in a way we have never seen before. You fight wars over ideas, over beliefs, over lines drawn on maps. You kill each other in numbers that should destroy any species. And yet, you survive. You grow. You adapt. You take the technologies of war and turn them into technologies of peace. You went from horse carts to splitting atoms in less than 200 years. She shook her head slowly. "The Aethery Council studied your history and saw only chaos and blood. They decided humanity was too dangerous to contact. They believed you would destroy yourselves before you ever reached the stars. And if you did not destroy yourselves, you might one day become a threat." Jake was quiet for a long moment. He thought about human history, the wars, the genocides, the endless cycles of violence. He could not argue with what Lyra said. It was true. "But that's not all we are," he said finally. "You've seen that now. We can be terrible, yes, but we can also be kind. We can sacrifice ourselves for strangers. We can love deeply and forgive impossible things." Lyra smiled softly. "I know, I have seen it. In you." She reached out and took his hand. "When I return to my people, I will tell them. I will make them understand. Humanity is not a threat to be feared. You are a species to be respected, to be welcomed." Jake looked at their joined hands, her silver skin against his brown. Two different species, from two different worlds, connected by something that transcended all differences. "Will you be able to return?" he asked. "Drath is still in power. Your enemies control the Empire." Lyra's expression hardened. "There are loyalists, people who remained faithful to my family. They are scattered and hiding, but they exist. If I can reach them, if I can unite them, we can fight back." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. "But it is more than just taking back the throne. When I was a princess, I lived in luxury. I attended ceremonies and smiled for the cameras. I was a symbol, not a person. I never questioned our ways. I never wondered if we were wrong about anything." She turned to face Jake. "Then I came here. I was wounded and terrified. I expected to die alone on a primitive world. Instead, I found you. A human who saved me without asking for anything, who fought impossible enemies to protect me, who showed me kindness I had never known, even in the royal palace." Her eyes glistened with emotion. "I am not the same person who fled the palace. I cannot go back to being a symbol. If I reclaim the throne, I must use it to change things, to show my people that they were wrong about humanity, about many things." Jake stood and walked to her. He put his hands on her shoulders and looked into her violet eyes. "You can do it," he said. "You're stronger than you know. You survived everything. The coup, the escape, the crash, the hunters. You survived because you have something inside you that refuses to give up." Lyra looked up at him. "So do you. I have never met anyone like you, Jake Miller." For a moment, they stood close together, the fire crackling behind them, snow falling outside the window. Something passed between them. An understanding. A connection. Then Jake stepped back. He knew she had a destiny that was bigger than anything he could be part of. She was a princess. She had an empire to save. He was just a ranger living in the mountains. "I need to tell someone," Jake said. "Someone I trust. We need help to get you off this planet." Lyra nodded. "Who?" "My sister Emma. She's a journalist. She's also the smartest person I know. If anyone can help us figure this out, it's her." Emma arrived at the cabin 3 days later. She was tall like Jake, with the same dark hair and determined eyes. At first, she thought her brother had gone crazy. Then she saw Lyra. Then she saw the alien technology. Then she sat down heavily in a chair and said nothing for a very long time. "Okay," Emma said finally. "Okay, so aliens are real. And you saved an alien princess. And now you need to help her get back to space so she can reclaim her throne and stop a galactic tyrant." Jake nodded. "That about covers it." Emma looked at Lyra. "And you. Your people have been watching us for centuries. Decided we were too violent and primitive. But my brother proved you wrong?" Lyra smiled. "Your brother is the most extraordinary person I have ever met, human or otherwise." Emma laughed. It was a strange sound, half amazement and half disbelief. "Well, I always knew Jake was special. Didn't expect it to be saving alien royalty special, but here we are." Together, the three of them made a plan. Lyra had been sending coded signals into space since she recovered enough to use her equipment. Loyalist forces had received her messages. A rescue ship was being prepared. But it would take time, and it was dangerous. If Drath's forces intercepted the signal, more hunters would come. Emma would stay in the nearest town and monitor for any unusual government activity. Jake would keep Lyra hidden in the mountains, and Lyra would continue reaching out to loyalists across the galaxy. Before Emma left, she pulled Jake aside. "You love her, don't you?" Jake did not answer. He did not need to. Emma put her hand on his arm. "She's going to leave, Jake. She has to. She has responsibilities you and I can't imagine. Are you ready for that?" Jake looked at Lyra, who was studying the starlight through the window. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the darkness. She was beautiful, alien and human at the same time, familiar and impossibly strange. "I know she has to leave," Jake said quietly. "I'm not trying to keep her. I just want to make sure she makes it home safely. After that, he shrugged. I'll go back to being a ranger, I guess. Watching the mountains. Living my quiet life. Emma looked at him with sad, knowing eyes. It won't be the same. After something like this, nothing is ever the same. She was right. Jake knew she was right. But he also knew that some things were more important than his own happiness. Lyra had a chance to change the galaxy, to save countless lives, to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. He would not stand in the way of that. Not for anything. 3 weeks later, on a clear winter night, Lyra received the message she had been waiting for. The Loyalist ship had arrived. It was hiding behind Earth's moon, waiting for her signal. They would send a shuttle to retrieve her at midnight. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. The moment Jake had been dreading. He and Lyra stood outside the cabin, looking up at the stars. The night was cold and silent. Snow covered the ground like a white blanket. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds, a ship waited to take her home. Thank you, Lyra said softly. For everything. Jake nodded. Thank you. Thank you. For helping me see that there's more out there than I ever imagined. Lyra turned to face him. Her violet eyes were filled with emotion. I will come back, she said. When this is over. When Drath is defeated. I will come back for you. Jake smiled, but it was a sad smile. You don't have to promise that. You have a whole galaxy to worry about. I'm just one human on one small planet. Lyra stepped closer. She put her hand on his chest, over his heart. You are the human who saved my life, she said. You are the human who changed everything I believed. You are not small, Jake Miller. You are infinite. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft and brief, like starlight touching snow. Then she stepped back, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. Wait for me, she whispered. Jake nodded. He could not speak. His throat was too tight. A light appeared in the sky. A shuttle, descending silently through the clouds. Lyra turned and walked toward it, her white hair flowing behind her like a banner. 1 year passed. Jake returned to his normal life. He walked the mountain trails. He watched the wildlife. He lived in his quiet cabin as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. And nothing was the same. He thought about Lyra every day. He looked at the stars every night. He wondered if she was alive. If she was winning her war. If she ever thought about the human who had saved her life in the mountains of Montana. Emma visited often. She had kept the secret faithfully. The world did not know that aliens existed. The world did not know that a princess from another star system had crashed on Earth and been saved by an ordinary ranger. The world continued turning as it always had, but Jake was not ordinary anymore. He had seen things that changed a man forever. He had fought enemies from beyond the sky. He had held something precious in his hands and let it go, because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes he wondered if it had all been a dream. Then he would touch the small device Lyra had left him. A communication unit, she had called it. Sleeping now, the program to wake if she ever sent a signal. 1 year. The device remained silent. Then, on a cold winter night almost exactly 1 year after Lyra had left, the device lit up. Jake was sitting by the fire when it happened. The small crystal device on his table suddenly glowed with soft blue light. His heart stopped. His hands trembled as he picked it up. A hologram appeared above the device. It was Lyra, but she looked different, stronger, more confident. She wore elegant robes of silver and gold. On her head sat a crown of crystalline light. Jake, she said. Her voice was warm, filled with emotion. I told you I would come back. Jake could not speak. He could only stare at the image of the woman he had saved, the woman who had changed his life forever. Drath is defeated, Lyra continued. The war is over. I sit on the throne of my ancestors now. The Aethery Empire is mine to guide. She paused, and her expression softened. It was hard, Jake. Harder than I can describe. There were times I wanted to give up. Times I thought I would die. But every time I felt like surrendering, I thought of you. I thought of the human who refused to abandon me, who fought impossible enemies with nothing but courage and determination. And I kept going. Jake finally found his voice. I'm proud of you, he said, his words rough. I knew you could do it. Lyra smiled. It was the same smile he remembered. The smile that had slowly grown from fear to trust to something deeper. I have so much to tell you, she said. But not like this. Not through a machine. She leaned forward. Look outside, Jake. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the night sky. At first, he saw nothing but stars and snow. Then he saw it. A light descending through the clouds. A ship, larger than the shuttle that had taken Lyra away. It landed silently in the clearing before his cabin. Jake walked outside, his breath making clouds in the cold air. The ship's door opened and a ramp extended to the ground. Figures appeared in the doorway. Tall, silver-skinned Aethery in formal uniforms. They walked down the ramp and formed two lines, standing at attention dot, and then Lyra appeared. She walked down the ramp slowly, her crown glittering, her robes flowing. But when she saw Jake, she broke into a run. She ran through the snow and threw herself into his arms. They held each other for a long time. No words were needed. The feeling of her in his arms, real and solid and alive, was enough. Finally, Lyra pulled back. Tears streamed down her silver face, but she was smiling. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you too, Jake said. Every day, a new figure walked down the ramp. A tall female Aethery with stern features and sharp eyes. She wore a military uniform covered in medals and decorations. Jake Miller, Lyra said. This is General Myra, my aunt. She led the loyalist forces that helped me reclaim the throne. General Myra approached and studied Jake with intense eyes. He felt like she was looking into his soul. So this is the human, she said. Her voice was cold and skeptical. The primitive native who my niece says saved her life. Jake met her gaze without flinching. I did what anyone would do. She needed help. I helped. General Myra made a dismissive sound. Your species barely understands basic physics. You live on one small planet and spend most of your time killing each other. You are hardly a civilization at all. Why should I believe that you accomplished what 4 trained Aethery shadows could not? One of the soldiers behind her stepped forward. General, the reports confirm everything. We found the bodies of the hunter team. They were killed by primitive weapons, traps, arrows, knives. This human defeated them alone. General Myra's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, she looked at Jake with something other than contempt. You killed 4 shadows? With primitive weapons? Jake shrugged. I knew the territory. They didn't. Plus, I had help. He looked at Lyra. She finished the last one. General Myra was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she inclined her head. It was a small gesture, but Jake understood its meaning. Respect. Perhaps, General Myra said carefully, we have underestimated your species. Lyra stepped forward. That is exactly what I have been trying to tell the Council. Aunt, for too long, we have looked at humans and seen only violence and chaos. But we were wrong. Humans have strength we never understood. Compassion we never expected. They deserve a place among the stars. She turned to face her soldiers and raised her voice. I hereby declare that the planet Earth is under the protection of the Aethery Empire. Humanity is to be recognized as an emerging civilization with full rights and dignity. Any species that threatens Earth or its people will answer to me personally." The soldiers bowed their heads in acknowledgement. General Myra nodded slowly. Jake stared at Lyra in amazement. "You did that for us? For humanity?" Lyra turned back to him. "I did it because it was right. Because you showed me what humans truly are. And because I made a promise to myself in that cave, when I thought you were dying in my arms. I promised that if I ever had the power, I would make sure your people were never looked down upon again." She reached out and took his hand. "But I did not come all this way just to make declarations. I came for you, Jake Miller." Jake's heart pounded. "For me?" Lyra smiled. "I am Empress now. I have power and responsibility beyond anything I ever imagined. But I have also learned something important. Power means nothing without someone to share it with. Someone who sees you as a person, not a symbol. Someone who stood by you when you had nothing. Someone who taught you what true strength really means." She squeezed his hand. "I am offering you a choice, Jake. You can stay here on Earth and live your quiet life in the mountains. Or you can come with me. See the galaxy. Stand beside me as I try to build a better empire. As my partner, my equal, my love." Jake looked at the ship. He looked at the stars. He looked at the cabin where he had lived alone for so long. Then he looked at Lyra, her violet eyes, her silver skin, her hopeful, vulnerable expression. "I'm just a ranger," he said slowly. "I don't know anything about politics or empires or galactic civilizations." Lyra laughed softly. "You know how to be kind. You know how to be brave. You know how to see the person behind the crown. That is more than most of my advisors can say." Jake was silent for a long moment. He thought about his life. The wars, the loss, the years of solitude. He thought about the night when a fireball fell from the sky and everything changed. He had saved a wounded alien princess. And she had saved him too, in ways he was only beginning to understand. She had reminded him that life was more than just surviving, that there was a whole universe out there, full of wonders and dangers and possibilities. "Okay," he said finally. Lyra's eyes widened. "Okay?" Jake smiled. It was a real smile, the first in a long time. "Okay, I'll come with you. I'll see your empire and your stars. I'll stand beside you." He raised her hand and kissed it gently. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that humanity is worthy of the gift you've given us." Lyra threw her arms around him again, laughing and crying at the same time. General Myra watched with a complicated expression. "The council will not be pleased," she muttered. "An alien as the Empress's consort." Lyra pulled back and faced her aunt with imperial authority. "The council will learn to accept it, just as they will learn to accept humanity. The old ways are over, Aunt. A new age is beginning." She took Jake's hand and led him toward the ship. The soldiers parted to let them pass. As they walked up the ramp, Jake stopped and looked back one last time. The cabin, the mountains, the forest, his old life. Then he turned and walked into the ship, into the future, into the stars. The door closed behind them. The ship rose silently into the sky, higher and higher until it was just another point of light among the countless stars. And somewhere in the galaxy, in the throne room of an ancient empire, a human man would stand beside an alien empress. Together, they would change the course of history. Together, they would prove that even the smallest species on the most primitive world could shake the foundations of the universe, because humanity had something the galaxy had never understood, something that could not be measured by technology or power or age. They had heart. They had courage. They had the stubborn refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. And that, in the end, was the greatest power of all.